Washington making moves in the portal, including a quarterback. Former four-star Elijah Brown goes from Stanford to the Huskies, and Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies is here to discuss just that. I mean, Damon Williams isn't going back in the portal, is he?
No, it's too late for that. The window is closed.
Oh, it's never too late, Roman. This is 2026 college football. Anything is possible.
No, this is one of those moves that I'm actually very curious about in terms of the long-term addition, and it's something I talked about over on Locked On Huskies. Like, Spencer, I feel like we're going to get to the end of the 2026 season, and there are going to be programs out there, if Damon Williams does want to come back to school for his senior season and he decides to forego the NFL draft, that are going to say, oh, we're not too interested in him. Maybe we were going to put out some kind of offer, but after the fiasco, how everything last year went, or, for us right now, how everything went, like, we're not going to be too interested in that. And for Jedd Fisch, this just feels like a way to get more experience in the room, because there are a couple other very talented quarterbacks on the roster, interested Keenan McMillan, Dash Byerly, and incoming four-star freshman Derek Zammit. And I like all those guys, but I think Jedd Fisch is sitting here saying, all right, let's go out and let's get someone to push those dudes, someone with some experience that, if something goes wrong, I know I can lean on this guy. He's got 9-10 games under his belt at Stanford with some kind of experience at the very least.
Yeah, it doesn't have a ton of time spent actually playing college football. He's got some, was at Stanford for a couple of years, had an injury that took up his first season of college football, really, but then was once upon a time billed as the future of Stanford football, because this is a guy that coming out was, kind of close to being a 5-star quarterback recruit, went to Mater Dei High School, which is one of the premier. Bryce Young went to Mater Dei, amongst other notable athletes and quarterbacks over the years. I mean, this is a guy who held offers from all over the place. And look, forgive me for making this comparison, but it feels kind of fitting. I think that at some level, it's similar to what Oregon has done the last couple of years, where they bring in a transfer, a former highly rated guy who hasn't come anywhere close to hitting his full potential just yet, and they say, we're going to stash you behind someone who we know is good and is going to start. You sit there and develop for a season, come in and be the backup if that's what has to happen in an injury situation, and we'd feel better about that because you have some experience. And then once the next guy moves on to the NFL, then it's your quarterback room. Oregon did it with Dante Moore. They're going to do it again with Dylan Raiola. I think there's a blueprint there.
So I would say yes and no. And the only reason I would say that, also, fun fact, Washington has now 2 former Mater Dei starting quarterbacks on their roster in Elijah Brown and Dash Byerly. Just throwing that out there. But the only reason I would push back on that is I'm very curious to see what Washington winds up doing in the 2027 class at quarterback, because one guy who I'm very interested in that both Oregon and Washington are pursuing is 4-star quarterback Sione Cajo from Lincoln High School down in Tacoma, Washington. And this is a guy who, like, Jedd Fisch is always just going to breed that environment of competition, right? And also we have to keep in mind that if Damon Williams does want to return for Washington for his senior year, he does have that option. That I don't think that door is ever going to be fully closed with Jedd Fisch. So there are so many different roads that this could take. And I just wanted to throw all of them out there to say, just keep in mind that this is also something that could happen. I'm very curious to see which one is the most realistic, because again, I feel like if I'm being honest, that we're going to see Damon Williams jet off to the NFL after 2026 because of the talent and just the athleticism, and also the fact that I don't know how many programs would want to say, all right, we want to go through what just happened and take all of that on at this point in time. I just feel like that's a very realistic possibility.
With his departure and then return and that whole mess, how has that gone over the last month or so since things have kind of settled down? We'll get to the rest of Washington's portal moves that they've made in just a moment, but I think for a lot of folks, and honestly myself included, when they think about Washington going into 2026, the first thing they're going to think about is, has Damon Williams won back the locker room and the fan base?
And I think that's something where, especially with the fan base, it's going to take a lot of time. And it's something we got to talk to Jedd Fisch a couple of weeks ago after this all happened, and he said, we've got 8 months. Give us some time and we're going to get all worked out, because I'm sure it's a giant locker room, Spencer. Like, there are going to be players who are, oh yeah, he's a talented quarterback, it's great to have him back. And I'm sure there are going to be other players that are sitting there saying, oh man, I don't know about this. This guy left us. He wanted to leave. I'm not too sure about this. He's got to win me back over. And I'm sure there are conversations that are being had on a daily basis at this point in time during winter workouts and things like that. I feel like 8 months is certainly more than enough time, considering that really from start to finish, it was about 48 hours or 72 hours of like total disaster and how everything happened. And I'm just curious to see how it's all going to work out, because I don't think there is one answer right now as to, oh yeah, this is absolutely what's going on.
It was very much Kevin with the chili. It got spilled and you looked at it, went, boy, that's a mess. And everybody knew it right away.
And now you're scooping it back in with a clipboard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a little bit how it feels. Outside of getting Damon Williams to return, which from a football standpoint is a very good thing for Washington going into Jedd Fisch's third year, what's been your assessment of Washington's transfer portal class?
I think it's been solid. If I were to point to one guy that I would say I'm most excited about in this transfer portal class, I know a bunch of Husky fans on Twitter are all over the specialists. Washington got one of the best punters available in the transfer portal, which, Spencer
leaning into Big Ten football.
Yeah, I was going to say, just totally
love
leaning into Big Ten football.
Love it.
So don't we love that? Now, the guy that I'm really excited about personally is cornerback Emmanuel Carnley from Virginia. This is a dude who was very, very impressive there last year. And I think he fits perfectly what Jedd Fisch and secondary coach John Richardson, as well as defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, really want from corners. Big, long, aggressive in press coverage, really good in run support, can tackle really, really well. I think that he's someone who is going to step in very well after Washington is losing 2 starting corners from last season in Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock. But the biggest thing is, I look at it and I think the defensive line is headed in the right direction, but I still want to see more, because they've added 3 defensive tackles in Darren Conley from Ball State, Deshaun Watts from Sacramento State, who was the highest graded run defender in either the FBS or FCS by Pro Football Focus last season, and Kai McClendon from Mississippi State, who was a true freshman starter in the SEC and then tore his ACL and didn't play in 2025, plus Logan George at Ohio State, who was really productive in 2024, yes, at a lower level at Idaho State, and then goes to the Buckeyes, gets hurt, plays like 20 snaps this past season. I really like this group. I just think it still needs a couple more pieces.
Oregon, goodness gracious.
You're going to hear it for that one.
That's just, I don't even know what to do with that. I really don't. Washington has gotten to a point in the transfer portal cycle where they are -8 on the net, as in 8 more players have left than have entered. Was that the expectation, and what do you make of the trade-offs that have been undertaken there?
I wouldn't say that was the expectation. I'm not shocked that we have seen guys exit. There are like 3 or 4 players that I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a loss. That one's going to be a loss. But for the most part, it was guys that were depth pieces or guys that were a really long way off from seeing the field in terms of the depth chart and everything like that. I fully expect for Washington to add 3 more pieces before it's all said and done. Is when we talked to Jedd Fisch a couple weeks ago, he said, okay, we have room for 6 more guys right now. That is the plan. And since then, we've seen 2 wide receivers come in BP Miller from Ohio State and Christian Moss from Kennesaw State, along with Elijah Brown, who we talked about a little bit earlier. I'm very curious to see what that's going to look like. I think all 3 of those spots need to be reserved for the defensive line, because you talk about the exodus, that's where we've seen most of it, where we've seen 6 guys graduate and 4 more enter the transfer portal. So that's or 5 more in the transfer portal, excuse me. I think that is just where we need to see the most in terms of additions of depth.
I may be stumbling to the finish line on this show, but Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies is definitely not. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.